for letting us come and take over your office and have the opportunity to take all these questions.
Well, thank you, Peter. It's always a pleasure to have you in this office. It's a different perspective for me, but it's my first time doing this kind of situation. I'm really looking forward to it.
Are you nervous? Because when you're opening yourself up to questions, I don't even know what the questions are going to be, let alone you.
No, I'm not nervous at all. I've always enjoyed talking to Newfoundlanders and Labradorians, listening to them, and certainly here to answer whatever questions they would have on their mind about, Budget 2017, 2018. So I'm looking forward to this next 45 minutes to have this discussion with you and with the people that are watching through Facebook.
Yeah, so if people do want to contribute with their questions, best way to do that is through the comments on Facebook, and I've got my iPad here, so I'll be able to pull some of them up and ask them as we go along. And the first one was one that was actually sent in advance, and I think it's sort of a good overall question to start with. It's from Adam Case, and he wants to know, how much did last year's protests over the budget shape the decisions you made in this budget?
I think that anyone that have watched me over the last year or so would I've always said that I really respect the people's right to protest. And there are certainly things about what we had to do in last year's budget that I knew they would be difficult choices that we had to make. Reasonably, so I was expecting to protest. We knew that going into this. So the difficult choices, but yet responsible choices. When you think about where we needed to be, what we inherited from the previous administration. We were facing last year, this time, about a $2.7 billion budget if we had stuck with the plan that was in place in the past. So it wasn't unexpected at all what we saw coming out of the budget, but most people that I talked to, they all felt that we could not leave this to the next generation. So I respect the people's right to protest, and I've talked to many of those.
But when I talked to, for example, some of your caucus members, they were surprised at just how strong some of those protests were, how personal they got in some cases. You really didn't think, look at those protests and say, you know what, maybe I need to ease back a little bit. Maybe I need to be a little gentler on my second budget because, of the outrage that you saw in the first time.
Last year we put in place a 7-year plan. And when we got through this year, we saw some increase in oil prices. We were able to deal with many of the expenses in government. So finding that balance, we knew last year, given the urgency of where we were, we needed to generate revenue. We needed to cut some expenses. We just couldn't go into this with a $2.7 billion deficit. We were having struggle. We were struggling actually just borrowing money, let alone raising revenue. We could not borrow money last year this time. That was a very unprecedented situation that we found our province in. And when I spoke to people that were the lending institutions and other premiers, we had never seen this province or any other province in this situation. So we had to make those choices to actually secure the financial footing of our province, which helped us this year by making some of the choices that we did last year. It certainly helped us this year. It gave us this year to secure our financial footing. We've been able to do that. Now a big focus on us in this budget is to create jobs in Newfoundland and Labrador. We are in a much better space this year, much better place this year than we were last year. And so we were able to make some decisions around gas tax, and we'll get into this a little bit further in a few minutes. But we were able to make some different choices this year and much more in control of our situation.
Okay, well, yeah, if people have questions about the gas tax, an opportunity to write in. You were talking about jobs. That sort of segues to the question we've got here from Leah Wells. How is the province lobbying Ottawa to support fishermen who are facing reduced quotas? We've seen protests. People are not happy with the crab and shrimp quotas. It's obviously not something the province controls, but what are you doing to try and get Ottawa on board?
Well, I just even within the last few weeks, I've been at a face-to-face meeting with Dominic LeBlanc and through the minister and the department. We're in constant contact with DFO officials. The fishery with some 17,000 people in our province right now, and if you're a shrimp fisherman in our province right now, I would suggest that this is a fishery that is in crisis, because it impacts those individuals. We've seen some significant decreases in quota within shrimp. We've seen crab quotas. We're not seeing the transition into a ground fishery that we want to be yet. So this is one of the reasons why we've reached out to make sure we secure the fisheries fund, which was something that's been around governments for quite some time. So we've secured over $100 million with this right now. We'll be able to work with industry. So there's a lot of discussions going on with our federal colleagues, as well as our 7 MPs that represent Newfoundland and Labrador at the federal table.
But what's the solution here? Because the science, according to DFO, is that their biomass is shrunk, the quotas have shrunk with it. do you think the quotas need to be higher, or what's the solution here to actually ensure that that livelihood is available for fishing?
Key for us right now is to make sure we stay very close and work with the industry in all of this, working with our harvesters, working with our processors. And of course, when the processors are open, when the harvesters are actually working and landing fish, well, it means there's work in our plants. We know this is a fishery that's in transition right now. Research and science, regardless of what the percentage is, we know that the shell fishery is on the decline, but we're seeing a rebound within the ground fishery. So this is in a transition period right now. So it's important right now that we have this federal money that we will see moving into the industry to support this transition, working with our processors, working with our harvesters, and working with communities that are impacted.
Okay, well, the next question comes from Paul Rowe, and he wants to know, Premier, when will we know the fate of our public library system? And could you briefly outline your vision for them as an integral part of the province? So there's this EY review that we're waiting on. You did reverse, at least for this year, the cuts to the libraries that were made for last year. When's the report going to give us a longer-term view?
Absolutely, and I informally saw some officials with the library board just this very weekend, and we had a discussion on this. So when the report comes in, there will be a number of recommendations that I'm sure will be there with the libraries. So all the libraries, there's been no closure within the libraries, and there's been some suggestions and recommendations that we would have seen last year with the decision that we made, how a new library system would work. So there's over $652,000 that's in support of our provincial library system to continue with the library system that we have in place. So when the report comes in, we'll take a look at those recommendations, and I can assure you that we've made a commitment to a good library system for Newfoundland and Labrador.
Were you surprised at how passionate Newfoundlanders and Labradorians are about their library system?
Surprised? No, not surprised at all, because libraries play a critical role in many of our communities, and I had many letters and emails and that would have come in from many individuals, young people of all ages, really, in communities across our province about libraries. And so, it's one of the reasons why we took a second look at this. We listened to the people, that came back with their comments and those remarks, and we decided to actually continue the funding for last year, do the review, and add some money to this year's budget to make sure that when the report comes in with the recommendations, then we'll take a real good look at what the library system will look like in our province.
So next question we have comes from Liam O'Neill. Why doesn't the government make auto insurance a public utility like we're seeing in British Columbia? So that would be a source of income, because right now the insurance companies are the ones who get to keep the money, and you then have some control over it. A lot of people are looking at insurance rates that have been creeping up and up and up.
Yeah, in the election platform in 2015, we made a commitment to do a review of auto insurance. That's still within the mandate letter of the Minister of Service, Newfoundland and Labrador. This is something that we're going to take a look at, but making any big decision like that will require some broad consultations. It's been a number of years that we've had a review of the insurance system within our province. We've made a commitment to do that, but we want to allow all those people that are impacted, the consumers, as an example, our healthcare system and so on, make sure that they're given the opportunity to feed into a broad consultation.
Well, and that sort of fits in. We got another question on a similar topic from Julie Morris, who says, will the government consult injured victims of automobile accidents in this review, as well as the industry?
Absolutely. I think this is the reason why we need to take our time with this. It's, even through my healthcare days, I've met many people, I've worked with many people, I've been a victim of auto accidents and have left them disabled and left them not in some very difficult situations. So it's important that we take a look at all of this, and this is the reason why we shouldn't make this decision very quickly. We need to do those broad consultations and also do a jurisdictional scan and see what's working in other provinces right now. It's been, as I said, it's been quite some time since we've done one, since we've done a review in our province, and it's in the mandate letter for our minister to do this.
So it's in the mandate letter. How long do you expect before? Obviously, we don't know how long it's going to take to finish, but at least, where is it on the priority list for the minister? How soon are we going to see that start?
Yeah, well, this is something that, we talk about in Cabinet, we've talked about with our ministers. This is something that we'd like to at least get initiated this year, and so we can then do the work that goes into getting those recommendations back and making sure that we have everything that we need to make the final decision.
So a question here from Wilma Norman about the topic of Muskrat Falls. You could probably have guessed that there would be a question or two coming up about
I've asked a few myself.
So what is government going to do to prevent Muskrat Falls from bankrupting the province and to ensure that ratepayers don't end up freezing?
It's a very good question, and it's something that I've thought a lot about, and we've been thinking quite a bit about. Matter of fact, in this year's budget, you will see that we wanted to signal quite early to ratepayers in our province that we will not, people in Newfoundland and Labrador cannot accept doubling of electricity rates. And this is the reason why, when you look at this year's budget, there's nearly, if you add them all up, nearly $750 million there in this year's forecast to offset electricity rates. And the reason why we did this is when you look at people that are making decisions that will impact where they're going to be in the next 3 to 4 years, they need to know that if I'm going to build a new house that's going to be 12, 1,500 square feet, if it's 2,000 square feet, whatever the decision will be for them, they need to know what will it cost me in energy, as an example. What will my power bill be? And so we needed to signal quite early to those individuals, we're taking care of this. And so we will not tolerate and see doubling of electricity rates, and we're already making provisions for this. Now back to the question about bankrupting the province. We've made significant gains this year with the Muskrat Falls project. It's getting it back on schedule, getting the budget under control, because it was out of control for quite some time when this project was sanctioned. It's not the project that it is today. I would argue that the due diligence and the pre-planning that was said that went into this project certainly didn't occur at all. And but when we came into government last year in December 2015, of course, this was a project that had significant commitments made. Very tough to ratchet it back at that point. But with the new CEO in place, with the new Muskrat Falls Oversight Committee in place, and we've been watching this very, very closely, even from this office. I spent considerable amount of my time on the Muskrat Falls project. So we're in a much better place today, and it's part of getting this finished. Will actually be part of, getting some power in from other sources that we can actually use for rate mitigation or rate reduction in the future.
So I want to just go back to that question of rates, because you said you want to give people an idea of what rates are going to be in advance so they can plan. When do you actually want to put a dollar figure on that?
Well, we've done that. $210 million in this year's budget, and $245 and $245. But what the rate would be?
Yeah, because that's a big question.
Yeah,
people want to know what's that number going to be on their bill.
Good question. So where the position that we've taken is that we will be competitive with Atlantic provinces, where the kilowatt per hour would be. And I watched this very closely. As a matter of fact, did a jurisdictional scan of other provinces yesterday. Right now, our rates are pretty competitive when you compare us to other parts of Canada, except for Hydro-Quebec. They're a bit of an outlier right now when it comes to low rates. But we're going to be competitive with Atlantic provinces, and that's the measurement that we will use to actually set the rates within Newfoundland and Labrador, but they will not be doubled.
In Ontario, one of the things that we've seen the Liberal government there, which has faced a lot of backlash over rising electricity rates, is they've dropped the provincial portion of the HST.
Yes.
That's something that until a few years ago, we weren't paying the HST. They added it back on because they needed the money.
Don't blame us for that one.
No, that was the last government. But are you looking at taking it back off again as one way to bring rates down?
I think when right now, we just wanted to signal very early to the people in the province, for those individuals, to our young families, and even to investors. If you're a business that's looking at setting up business in Newfoundland and Labrador, and if it's a significant size, you want to know what your operational costs will be. So we want to get that message out early. But embedded in the $210 million that we've already forecasted for, it's not a reduction in the provincial portion of the HST. So there's room there. We have lots of things that we can look at, and as I said so many times now with our CEO Stan Marshall, we've had quite a few discussions on what we will use for rate reduction, and that is probably something that could be considered when we get closer to that. But the $210 million that we put in this year's budget in a forecast does not include that. So these are extra opportunities that you talk about right here.
Let's get to the topic of minimum wage, because we've got a couple of questions coming in about that. So this one is from Jasmine Lester, any intentions to index the minimum wage to the consumer price index of inflation for the province of Newfoundland and Labrador? There's a review right now looking at that.
Yeah, you're right. There's a review that we're looking at right now. Some other provinces have taken that approach around CPI and indexing it to that. And what you would compare it to would be a national CPI or a provincial CPI. Because what you get when you look at it as a province, as an example, sometimes you can get more dramatic swings in CPI based on certain circumstances. So we need to be able to find what the appropriate benchmark would be and what that span would be. So this review is ongoing right now, but we're committed to making minimum wage reflective on where we are in the current environment. So we've seen a couple of increases now that will for minimum wage. The review is underway, and we look forward to getting those recommendations back.
Well, if you're just joining us, we're doing a Facebook Live with Premier Dwight Ball. We're here in his office, and we're taking your questions. So if you've got something that you want to ask the Premier, go ahead, type it up in the comments section. We'll get to as many of them as we can over the sort of 45 minutes or so of the Premier's time that we have. So send them in, and we'll see how many answers we can get. Question now about taxes, and because this was something, certainly the last budget raised a lot of taxes, got a lot of people upset. The question here is from Errol Squires. Do you think that maybe the answer could be lowering taxes in order to stimulate the economy, to encourage more people who might want to set up businesses, and in fact, you would then end up increasing the revenue that you get by spurring that economic development?
Yeah, there's economic analysis when you look at, if you take $1 in taxes and you put that back into the economy, what it is you get back in return. So the main thing is make sure you're competitive within your jurisdiction and how you compare yourself to competing provinces. Right now, we know that we're very competitive, but we've made a commitment to a tax review that will be started this year to just actually see where it is in all the tax-specific areas that we would need to make some adjustments. So reducing taxes as an economic stimulus is something there's a broad debate on. And what you would get for every dollar you reduce in taxes, what that means to the economy. But always we will be looking for ways to put money back into the pockets of Newfoundlanders and Labradorians. We were able to do that this year with the reduction in gas tax. This was not a tax that none of us liked last year. We knew the impact of it. Every single person in this province that would use a vehicle is impacted by this. So the 16.5 cents that went on last year, June the 1st this year, you will see a reduction of some 8.5 cents in December. There will be a further 2 cents that will come off of this. And then, at that point, or 4 cents that will come off of this in December. Then we'll take another look at it, where we are in December of this year and what it is, if we can do some more with that, or when it is we'll reduce the remaining part of that tax.
You talked there about a tax review. Is this to change around how tax is collected, but collect the same amount of money, or is this a way to try and end up taxing people more?
I think we need to know the answer to the question that your previous, or that came from the question that just came through your Facebook site, is that what it would be the impact of this particular tax. As an example, the HST would be probably different than a reduction in HST might be very different than a reduction that you would see in personal income tax, as an example. And provinces look at this very differently.
So I guess the idea then is, if you're going to cut $1 of taxes, where's the best way to do it? Is it HST? Is it business tax? Is it income tax?
And that's the idea. And making sure that we continue to be very competitive. We're in an environment too that we actually compete with many of the professionals. When they decide on coming to Newfoundland and Labrador to live and set up shop, or if it's just a healthcare professional like a physician that's coming here to work, where we are when we compare ourselves to other jurisdictions, but always keeping in mind that we have a lot of low-income people, we have a lot of seniors, and their ability to actually pay taxes would be limited. And so first and foremost, we need to make sure that we put in the appropriate measures, taking all of this into consideration.
Question, this is sort of a hot topic issue right now because we are in the middle of contract negotiations with most of the big public sector unions. Scott Walsh wants to know, are there discussions about rolling back and or freezing the salaries of public servants?
I've never, right now the discussion at the collective bargaining table, it needs to get there. And I've always said and made a commitment to meaningful discussions at the bargaining table. We've never talked about at all about rolling back wages. Matter of fact, I've said it publicly many times that that's not something that we want to do. It's not something that we're considering doing. But there is a discussion that needs to occur at the negotiating table, and I'm encouraging NAPE and CUPE and all the other organized labor groups that we have in our province. Let's get to the table. We need to put some certainty onto the public sector workers in our province, and I will tell you, Peter, they do a great job in delivering services, be it healthcare, education, the people that work in this building that we're in here tonight. They do a great job, and we need to get at the table, get some certainty so that they know what it is they expect, and as they continue to work and provide the valuable services to the people of our province.
So you're saying that you're not asking for any sort of wage freeze or rollback as part of the negotiating process?
While I said there's a negotiating that needs to occur, what I said was I'm not asking for any rollbacks.
Okay, so so no rollbacks, but that's leaving the option open for a wage freeze. Let's get to a question from Labrador, a place that's close to my heart. I spent 7 years living there, and I've driven the Trans-Labrador Highway many times, so this is a question that I know about fairly well. Evelyn Party wants to know, will we ever see the Trans-Labrador Highway completely paved?
I will never be satisfied until I see the Trans-Labrador Highway paved. It was a big commitment that I made to the people in Labrador, made that on behalf of all Newfoundlanders and Labradorians, and I've traveled that road many times. And I am so looking forward to the day when you can get in the vehicle from Lanse-Claire and you can drive the paved road right to Vancouver. And I think the people of Labrador, it is 2017, and they should expect to see, and we've made a big commitment, some $55 million this year, extra money based, and even with the 63 and odd that we put into the budget last year. So these are big commitments to the Trans-Labrador Highway, and we're going to continue to make those investments. As I said, I look forward to the day and will not be satisfied until we see the Trans-Labrador Highway paved.
Have you ever driven it in the springtime? Because when I moved out of Labrador, it was April, and I've driven through the soupy mess, and we've seen again this year, it seems to be every spring you get the pictures of mud up to people's axles, and that seems to be the time that's really the worst.
I've driven it in the spring, and Peter, I've driven it in the fall of the year too. As a matter of fact, I have one story of driving it really around early November, and we were coming in to open the house. We were in the opposition at the time, coming in to open up the House of Assembly, and I can tell you it was mud, it was coated on, that we had to get someone actually from the outside where we parked the vehicle to open the door. That's how bad it was. So I understand the conditions, and we have 4 Labrador MHAs that drive those roads on a regular basis, in particular Lisa Dempster, who spends a lot of time on that road. And I know firsthand, I've experienced it. I don't need the pictures. I know what it's like firsthand, especially from Happy Valley Goose Bay into the Straits area. So that's the portion that I've driven the most, and it's where as most people would agree that travel that road, it's the worst road that we see on the Trans-Labrador Highway.
Another Labrador question here. This one's coming from Kyle Moore. What are your thoughts on the Wabash mine? It's currently up for sale. There's a lot of question about whether or not it's essentially going to be sold for parts or whether or not there's more viability. Your government's commissioned a couple of studies looking at, do you think there will be a time when Wabash Mines is open again and operating as a proper mine?
I hope so, but one thing, the commitment that we've made, and I meet quite often with all our Labrador MHAs, as I just mentioned, but in particular in this case, MHA Leto, and he keeps us abreast, as Minister Cody would as well, on the mining issues and the mining opportunities that would exist in Labrador West. So we will exhaust every effort that we have available to us for Wabash Mines, and we know now with IOC that they'll be opening up Wabash 3 as an example. So we'll work with the people in Lab West, and if there's any opportunity at all to open up that mine, we want to explore it because we believe in the future of Lab West, and we see the mining industry, in particular iron ore, starting to come back a bit. But we're seeing interest all throughout Labrador, and in some cases on the island portion of the province as well within the mining industry.
You're watching Facebook Live with Premier Dwight Ball. We're here in his office and we're taking your questions, so keep them coming. We've had a lot of good ones so far, so if you've got anything else that you want to ask him or there's any answers that he had that you want a little more follow-up, write them in the comments section. I'm going to be taking as many of them as I can, and we'll try and get you some answers. Another question about roads. We were talking about the Labrador roads, but this one from Cassie Bob Keene. What's the government going to do with the roads and highways across Newfoundland and Labrador? They're deplorable everywhere. You need to start repairing them rather than just filling up the holes every few years, saying that this is just a waste of taxpayers' money.
Well, Cassie, I would tell you that every time that I sit down in meetings, when I meet people in their communities, or it could be anywhere, it could be at a coffee shop, it could be even around our own dinner table for that matter, we do have a lot of problems with our roads in our province. It's a big piece of infrastructure, nearly 10,000 kilometers of road within our province. We have guardrails that are, need to be replaced and so on. We put nearly $77 million within our roads budget this year. Not, and of course, the Trans-Labrador Highway is not part of that, but the Provincial Road Program. So there's quite a bit. There is a big investment. But one of the things that we did this year, which is very different than any other government has done in the past, this is very different here. We put in place a 5-year provincial roads plan. So people, no matter where they live in the province, they know in year one, 100% of what roads will be done in which area. The next year is 75%. So there's a 5-year road program in place right now. Added to that, we've made a commitment to get our tenders out earlier, so we're getting better value for money. Just last year, as a result of the efforts that we put into the early tendering, we saw 90 kilometers of road that was done, an extra 90 kilometers of road for $5.6 million less money. So we're getting better value, we're putting certainty, we're taking the politics out of this, and people will know in advance of what sections of road will be done within our province. But I agree, we have a tremendous amount of work, a lot of work to do with our provincial roads.
And just a little follow-up here on the exact same topic from Shane Snook. This spring, my girlfriend and I were nearly killed by a craterous pothole on the TCH that wasn't even marked. So Shane's comment here is, when will we take our road safety more seriously?
I agree, and I mean, I travel these roads as well, and I've seen the potholes. I've seen I can have similar experiences to what Shane would see there. And there's ways we will do this better. We work very closely with Transportation and Works, making sure that they get out with early maintenance repairs, get the maintenance in place. But the road work in Newfoundland and Labrador, there's a lot of work that would have to be done. And putting measures in place, getting better value for money. We are starting this year. This is the first year that we've seen such significant amount of changes already, and making sure we get the better value for money. But I will assure you that people all over this province are reaching out and giving their suggestions. And added to that, I will say before I finish on this, there are 2 other key initiatives which I think are very important. People often complain about the mix of asphalt. Why is it that asphalt in our province doesn't seem to be lasting as long as it is in other provinces? So this year we're doing a lot of research into what the proper asphalt mix should be like, and also how much work can we do in a short construction season. And so there's a pilot this year on nighttime road construction as well. So all these initiatives, early tendering, 5-year road plan, looking at the asphalt mix, all of this will lead, I'm sure, to more and better value for our provincial roads.
I want to get you to address a comment that has been made, and we've had a number of different comments all sort of on the similar topic. And so this one's from Virginia Chafe, and she's pretty blunt. She says, I don't believe a word you say, from Ed Martin to Burn Coffee and everything in between. And I guess she's talking about, there have been a number of controversies involving your government. What do you say to people whose trust has been eroded? For example, they look at the Ed Martin severance issue. They look at the fact that the top bureaucrat that you appointed was actually suing a provincial agency at the same time he was doing this. What do you say to people who say, who may have who voted for you in the last one, and the trust just isn't there anymore?
Well, to Virginia, number one, based on the comment that you just made there, Peter, about suing a provincial agency, that wasn't the case. That was a statement, a claim that was put in on behalf of a Nalcor employee. There's politics in all of this, and people have gamesmanship, I would suggest, for different agendas. So that particular case there, the statement of claim was filed. Based on a limitation period that had expired. So what the former clerk did was put in a statement of claim, notified the client that he would not be represented, he would not represent that client, gave them the opportunity to actually pursue what was a wrongful dismissal case. So that was that one. The other one was a statement of claim that was referred to with the health authority. That one was nearly 3 years in the works and will settle just shortly after. So, you know, there's a lot of claims that's been made by the opposition. You know, as an example, we see Laureen Michael as an example upstanding and talking about a conflict of interest. And what many people in this province don't know is she stood up in a management commission meeting and voted for her own raise, the only person in that legislature, and she voted for that. And we've seen, you know, Paul Davis and put in deputy ministers and so on. So in the case to Virginia's comments, I understand that, you know, but there's a lot of nuances and, you know, some of it that the story never gets completely told. But you know, we can do a better job. We have conflict of interest legislation that's nearly 25 years old right now. I've already talked to the Minister of Justice and Public Safety. We've got to get this this legislation more relevant to where we are today.
So,
that needs
so what
to happen.
changes do you think need to? What would you like to see tightened for conflict of interest rules?
There's a number of things. It's, you know, when you expect anyone to come into, you know, public office and leave the private sector or leave a private life, you know, we need good people to be able to easily transition into public life. And it is not unusual for that to take anyone that's been busy in their private life, sometimes it takes time to transition into public life. And what we had in place in Mr. Coffey's contract was provisions around ways that he would have to report a conflict of interest over and above the legislation that already exists. So there's no doubt in my mind that Mr. Coffey, known his integrity, known his experience, and the professional that he is, if he was in a conflict of interest, that he would have declared that. But unfortunately, the transition period was not, we could just not get all this completed. And, you know, he made a decision to resign. But getting good people into key government positions right now, we need to make sure that we get the proper rules in place. But we also will need people in these positions to help get this government, get this province back on track. And in some ways, you know, we just want to make sure we put the proper legislation, the proper rules in place to allow that to happen. We need the best of the best to actually help this province out today.
And what specific rule changes do you think would allow you to attract the people you need while still maintaining that separation? Because the public wants to know that someone who's taking a job is doing it to help the public, not to help themselves.
Absolutely, and in my particular case, you know, coming from a private life into a public life, you know, you know, anything that I would have been involved in is in a blind trust where it should be. Those rules are very clear, and the conflict of rules, the conflict of interest rules and legislation that currently exists. As I said, 25 years old right now, outdated, and they need to be refreshed. They need to be updated. So, you know, the things that you just talked about, you know, when you look at people in the situation that Byrne Coffey was in, I've just explained this. But how you transition into private life into public life, we need to make sure we have better measures in place. You need examples on all that. We need to look at conflict of interest legislation that exists at the federal level, at the provincial level in other provinces. And, you know, let's see what's working for them right here now, and then we get our legislation updated in our province.
Changing to a completely different topic, this one is a question from Carla Crotty. Are there any plans to do something about the fentanyl crisis currently gripping St. John's? We've had a story just in the headlines tonight about a mother, you know, who died overdosing on heroin. It seems that what used to just be a problem for Vancouver or Toronto is now a real issue here. So how are you addressing that?
I would suggest, Peter, right now that, you know, at this particular time of the day, that no matter where you go, there's probably a young mother and a young father that's having a discussion with a teenage son, daughter, who would be struggling with addictions. And when you look at the all-party review that we've done on mental health and addictions, there are a number of recommendations that would deal with this very issue. I spent nearly 30 years, you know, in the healthcare system, and I know the impacts of opioids, the impacts that it's having on families. And what we're seeing with fentanyl right now is similar to the stories that we've seen in BC. We've seen this coming across the country. It's a national issue. And we can do, with fentanyl as an example, but with opioid in a general sense, making sure that we have naloxone, you know, readily available, and making sure that we have the proper counseling within our schools, within our medical system, as an example, access to good counseling services, and in particular within our education system, we need to create an awareness of the damage that opioids can do on our young people. So it's about education, it's about making sure we have the proper counseling services in place, and those that are in the extreme circumstances of being addicted to things like fentanyl and opioids, making sure that we have naloxone and Suboxone and methadone readily available for those people, that when they want to make the decision to get away from opioids, that those resources are available to them.
Does there need to be a wider distribution? Does this need to be the sort of thing that anyone can walk into a pharmacy and say, I want one, and it's covered under the drug program or made available for free rather than having to pay for it?
You know, I think there's a lot of things that we can do, and maybe that's one of the options that we will need to consider. And but making sure first and foremost that we have the education, the dangers of opioid, and I would encourage mothers and fathers, and if it's grandparents, teachers too, to deal with this on a daily basis. Get the education, know what to look for. With our young people right now that are actually addicted to opioids, because I can tell you the journey is a tough one for many of our young people that have to deal with this. But let's get the education where it needs to be. Let's get the proper resources in place to help those young people primarily, but yet our adults too that struggle with opioid addictions.
This sort of works our way into the next question. This is about the replacement for Her Majesty's Penitentiary. Your Justice Minister is actually going to go spend tomorrow as a corrections officer, so he'll get a bit of an inside look as to how things function. But when will you guys commit to building a new prison? The old one has outlived its usefulness 25 years ago, says Jerry Baker. There were new plans drawn up when Danny was Premier. Is it going to take someone getting killed before you guys get on with it and stop being swayed by public cynicism?
Yeah, we've got, there's some money in this year's budget, nearly $500,000 to put towards, looking at the options that we would have with the penitentiary this year. We have some very old infrastructure. The penitentiary is one. The Waterford, built in 1855, is another one. We've made a commitment again to replace the Waterford. We deal with mental health and addictions within our province. It's the Waterford that we need to replace too, but I agree the penitentiary is something that is very outdated right now, and it's something that the Justice Ministry will be there tomorrow morning. That's not his first time being there, I assure you too, and we had a discussion about this afternoon about his visit tomorrow morning. He's very engaged in this, and it's something that he agrees and sees that it's necessary to find ways to replace. And in this current financial environment, we've got to explore all the opportunities that we have available to us to replace that old and outdated infrastructure.
This seems to be something that everyone seems to agree it needs to be replaced. It's the mechanics of how that happens, where the money comes from. We saw there was some talk for a long time about the federal government maybe chipping in. Under the last government, it seemed to be a no-go. They sort of said, we're going to have to go it alone. You often talk about the great relationship you have with Judy Foote, with the Prime Minister. Do you think that you'll be able to get federal money in order to help cover this, even though it's a provincial institution?
We see there's, whatever the opportunities will be, as we go through this year, and we get, the reviews on the reports that will be done, and the Minister of Justice and Public Safety is actively involved in this. There are a number of different things when you look at the federal relationship of where we need to be and where Ottawa can be involved and could be involved. There might be an opportunity for us right there. But we're going to look at whatever the opportunities we have for things like the penitentiary, for the Waterford, and the infrastructure that needs replacing in our province.
You're watching a Facebook Live with the Premier. We're taking your questions for Dwight Ball. So we have a couple more minutes left, so a chance to get a few more questions in before we have to wrap up. And this is a question from Catherine Walters, and she wants to know, the provincial ferry system is, she describes it, a deplorable, pathetic condition. She's been in the lineup in Portugal Cove since just before 5 o'clock. And she's still there, and the boat just tied up for fuel shortly after 7, with supper-time commuters languishing in their cars. What's government doing to address she calls it a growing crisis faced by communities that depend on ferries?
Well, in Catherine's situation, of course, she's waiting in a lineup right now for a ferry that's ready to go. The ferry's in place for Bell Island, unfortunately, it's just another example of the previous administration, the planning, the very poor planning that they did for that ferry service. They went out and made a commitment to a ferry, but what they did make a commitment to was a docking facility. So that work is ongoing right now, and when that is done, well, of course, the new ferry will be in place for that route. We have an aging ferry infrastructure, ferry vessels, the vessels that we use on the many routes that we have in our province right now, and in the particular case in Labrador, as an example, there's a number of reports. One of those will be the fixed link report before we can determine, what the best ferry system should look like, how long it should be. So the report on the fixed link will be done within a few months, and that will then determine, what the ferry system should look like, how long it should look like, and what that service should look like. So, through Transportation and Works, we understand what we have inherited from a ferry system, but we've made a commitment to replace the ferries, wherever we can, financially do this. I mean, right now, the situation that we have within our province restricts many of the decisions that we'd like to be able to make, but the ferry system is something we know is important to many people that live on the many islands that we have within our province and depend on those services.
So the work is underway right now to put in the docking facilities. When do you expect to have the new ferry in operation for Catherine so that she can get home?
Peter, I'm frustrated with this myself too. Can you imagine coming into this office and knowing that you've got a new ferry ready to go to meet the needs of Bell Island, and the previous administration forgot to do the dock? Imagine how frustrating that is for someone like me and others, and people like Catherine who are depending on this service. When that ferry showed up in Newfoundland and Labrador, there was an expectation that they were going to be able to ride on it. So when the dock is done, and I'm not anticipating this to be much longer, but I want to get that in place as well so that we can get this service in place for the people of Bell Island.
So, question here from Fred Rose. Premier Ball, did you know the state of the province's financial situation before you got elected? How do you really feel when you see comments that blame you for the mess that we're in?
Disappointed, because I will tell you, no, I didn't know. There was only a few people I would suggest that actually did know. And one of them is the leader of the opposition, and there was a gentleman that actually told me a story just this morning. He said it seemed like, as a premier, you were rushing in to put out a fire, and the people that started the fire were rushing out, and when they got out, they were throwing rocks at you. So it was not something that we knew. No one within, I would even say that there was people even in the old administration, that there were things that were even kept from them, but they were definitely kept from the people of our province. No one expected the situation that we inherited, no one at all. And then added to that, in January, we saw oil prices drop to $27. So that actually compounded things. So it was a situation that we found ourselves into, but we made some choices, and we've made a commitment now. It takes some courage to do this job under those circumstances, but we know we're doing it for the future of our province. I'm very optimistic that with the natural resources and what we have available to us, that we will work our way through this. But first and foremost, we had to get the financial house in order. This year will be a big focus on jobs for Newfoundlanders and Labradorians. But we have the right group in place right now. We have people from all across this province that are reaching out, and we will tackle this together, and we're going to get through it. I'm extremely optimistic of where we will be, and we will not be passing on this year's mortgage to the next generation.
Question here from Jolene Bonia, and this question seems very fitting since we're on the internet right now having this discussion. When are rural communities getting DSL or cable internet? Companies do not hire people to work from home who have wireless or satellite internet. So I think what she's getting at here is the issue is that, yes, you may be able to get it on your phone, but it's a very expensive way, similarly satellite. What's the plan to get more small communities connected into what is really required? This is essential infrastructure. It's almost like home phones used to be 20 years ago.
I mean, every single MHA that we have, and we have quite a few of them that represent rural districts, primarily, and I guess in some places you could go even in areas like St. John's, but primarily in rural Newfoundland and Labrador. These are discussions that we have quite often with our MHAs and with our ministers. We have Minister Mitchamore now that is doing quite a bit of work on this. We're looking for ways to actually create the partnerships with those providers that we can actually close those gaps. The way I look at it is when you look at education services, when you look at healthcare services, what people expect if they want to live in a small community, and we're seeing more and more of this. I represent one of the largest rural districts in the province, and so as we deliver healthcare services and education services, broadband is really basic these days. So we want to make sure we put in place a good road network and we put in place good, strong broadband so we can actually use that as a conduit to support those services. But also for Newfoundlanders and Labradorians that decide to work in those areas, just like the story that we're being told here tonight, that they can work in those smaller areas and then send that work to where it needs to be. I just recently.
So, sorry to cut you off, but is there a goal to sort of say, here's when we'd like to have everyone connected to high-speed internet by a certain year? Or, it's one thing to say, yeah, it's a great idea, we really want companies to do this, but
yeah, those last miles, as you know, that last 10%, that last 5% are always the most expensive, 5% to get coverage on. But the story that I was going to tell you there was about an engineer that's working, in a rural area in our province right now. And this is exactly how he works. And this is what we got to promote. So for me to come out today and say that this is going to be done by 2019 or 2018 or 2020, that will be putting an expectation out there that I really don't know what the cost would be. I've always said that, whatever we do, it's based on the evidence, it's based on the cost analysis that we have available to us. But I want to get this done sooner than later.
Want to go back to the topic we were talking about, fentanyl and naloxone kits. So this is a question from let's see. Stephen Linda McAllister. Why are we covering the cost of naloxone kits for overdose victims, but making diabetics, EpiPens, and allergic reactions for other persons with illnesses, making those people pay for their medication? So I guess the idea here is, why are we helping someone who may be a drug addict, but we're not helping someone who's...
I know. It's a good question. And, these are the things that we have to deal with all the time. And, which particular item should be covered, EpiPens versus, naloxone kits and so on. We face this all the time. After spending quite a number of years, in the healthcare system, I've often said that the perfect healthcare system is just always seems to be completely out of reach. We have great discussions at our cabinet table with with a very experienced surgeon that sits there. We have someone with a nursing background that sits there. We have this throughout our caucus as well. So we understand the challenges that people and how you deliver healthcare services, and what should be paid for and what the price should be. It's finding the balance and is trying to live within our means. But these are good questions, and I understand them. In my previous life, I've had to say no, that this is not covered to quite a few people. This is not new to where we are, and that's the experience that I've had. But I will tell you, there are programs out there that are available for many people who can afford certain things, and we have lots of options, some of which people in the province are not even aware of. And so we ask you to reach out to your MHAs, even reach out to this office, to your ministers, as an example, to see what options you have available to you.
Now, I'm just looking at the clock here, and I know you agreed to 45 minutes. I've still got a bunch more questions. Are you okay to take one or two more?
Yes, let's do it.
Okay, so we've got maybe a couple minutes left, so this is your last chance to get in any questions that you might have for the Premier, and we'll get as many as we can before we let him go. So one question here from John Kyle Huzzy. What's your opinion of the school system right now?
We've the school system, John. It's when you look at where we are from a K-12 system, one of the first things that we did was ask the minister put in place a Premier's task force on educational outcomes. And I've talked to many teachers, not satisfied with where we are today, and many parents and students as well. So we'll get the report back from the Premier's task force on educational outcomes now very soon, and coming out of that will be recommendations. We've already put in this year's budget some money with the expectation that there's going to be some changes that will be required from a K-12 system. If you look today, we're currently looking for some 500 teachers in the K-12 system. We've got full-day kindergarten now fully implemented. We've made changes in this year's budget in the early childhood education. We've been able to get the threshold increased so that we can help families to access early childhood education. And also this year we've made an investment of some $1.3 million to help support our early childhood educators, adding $1 to their wage. So from the early childhood education to the K-12 system, we've made significant budget commitments this year. And added to that, we've seen some replacement of aging infrastructure as well.
Question from Brian Helpert. What's up with the iceberg tax hikes? So I guess he's talking about, this is something that was introduced in the last budget, where if you take icebergs and you use it for water, I guess either you're brewing beer or you're using it to make other sorts of products, now you've got to pay a tax on basically every liter of water that you're using here. Why tax icebergs?
Yeah, there was always some tax there. So the minister today made an announcement within the House of Assembly that he's working with that industry, and this, I'm not so sure if this is the individual or not, but he's working with the industry now to just figure out, what it is we can actually do to help that industry continue to grow. We want to support small businesses and within our province is important to us. It's an economic generator. It creates jobs for Newfoundlanders and Labradorians. So the minister is on to this particular issue right now.
So this next one is a topic that we've had a bunch of different versions of this question, but Faye Best wants to know, why are you not putting an extra tax on junk foods and soft drinks and removing the gas tax and levy? So I guess the idea is that gas is something that we all need, chips and pop, not something we all need. Why not? And especially with the obesity problem that we have in this province, and we're not as healthy as we should be. So why not give it that extra little push to get people away from that and towards healthy things?
He's right. We have the highest obesity rates in the country right now. So there is obviously great debate ongoing, which what the appropriate level of taxation would be, and this is something that we've had many discussions on. Many jurisdictions would have had this discussion as well, and we've seen many parts of Europe have had this discussion with varying degrees of success. To the gas tax, we've been, as I've mentioned earlier, some 12 and some 8.5 cents in June of this year, some 4 cents that will come off in December. So the extra gas tax is put on. We're dealing with that, and we will review the remaining tax. One of the other things that I want to talk about, though, as you support communities, and there's a bit of an oversight for me in the beginning, and I'll get back to this tax that we're talking about right here, but is I want to make people aware of the significant investment that we've made in low-income earners and with our seniors in particular, some $120 million that will actually support 155 families in this province. It's significant. As an example, if you're a senior, I just want to get this information out there because it's not widely known. So if you get if you're a senior, a couple in our province today with $26,000 or less, you have the option. You will be getting $1,800 back. We've made a commitment in this year's budget to continue that. It's probably the highest rebate and subsidy that we've seen in the history of our province to our seniors and low-income families. But back to taxation, we're going to do the tax review, see where our options are to actually reconfigure the tax system. If this is something that feeds into this, and I'd encourage people to get involved in the consultation as they come to the communities around our province. It's important to us that we do the proper review and see where the options are.
So this could be something as part of the tax review that people, if you're hearing from a lot of people, this is something that's valuable, that could be something that's part of that. Question here from Patrick Hannaford. What's the status of the MHA pension plans? It seems like it's gone through every week. There's a new version of the plan. In fact, there was just a technical briefing, in fact, tonight for your MHAs for the Management Commission dealing with another version of the pension plan. So where do things stand in terms of the pensions that MHAs
Well, I'll speak for our party. I can tell you I'm not going to speak for Paul Davis because he's already out there on record, and the PCs are out there on record of wanting to protect the gold-plated plan. The NDP are out there on record in the Management Commission of wanting to protect a gold-plated plan. So we know where the NDP are, we know where the PCs are. For us right now, there's a recommendation, I think, that have come from caucus to put in what would be a defined benefit. So that would be, that would mean it's similar to an RSP. So you put your money in, if indeed, when your term's over, whatever the amount of money that's there available to you, well then you get that. So there's no ongoing liability to the pension plan for this.
Right. So there's no guarantee. You don't, when you retire, you're not guaranteed a certain amount. It's if the stock market does well, you might get lots.
Absolutely. So what it does is it takes the risk. it takes the risk out for government, it reduces that liability, and this is what our caucus the caucus is actually putting this proposal forward right now. It is definitely saving money for taxpayers in Newfoundland and Labrador. It's a commitment that I made at a convention in June, I think, of 2014, I think the year was, and it was an election platform commitment to us as well. So that'll be dealt with now in the next week or so.
You're someone, though, who likes to talk about making things independent. You know, that's one of the key messages that you talked about, you know, looking at evidence-based approaches. There was an independent process. You had a whole committee that looked at the whole issue of pensions, came up with a recommendation. This wasn't part of the presentation that MHAs gave at the time. So why not say, you know, we're going to respect this independent process rather than saying, you know what, we're going to push this aside because we've got a better idea? You
could do that. But the caucus came forward, the presentation or the proposal that came out of caucus it was an extra way to save money for the people in our province. And so they had the desire to actually say, no, we think we can go a little further here. So when you look at the proposal that comes, you know, from the committee, you can do things to actually make it better for Newfoundlanders and Labradorians. This proposal, with the analysis that's been done, will save the taxpayers of Newfoundland and Labrador money, and it will put an end to the ongoing liability. And so our caucus has showed a lot of courage, and I commend them for this. It really shows that they were concerned about the pension plan for MHAs in our province, and I think it's a great sign of leadership from our caucus. And what we know right now is that we've seen signals, you know, from the other parties that this is not something that they want to support. They want to protect the so-called gold-plated plan, but you know, this will be a discussion within the Management Commission that will happen now in the next few days or weeks.
One more question here. Krista R. Williams wants to know, how do you justify an extension to the mobile Central High School when all the logic points to a new middle school? An over-budget extension, she says, is not the right answer. Please meet with concerned parents in order to discuss better solutions.
Yeah, I think the school board has met with the families in the mobile area, and so right now they've made the decision with the evidence that they have available to them. And I think that evidence, that information has been shared with the families there, why the decision was made like it is. And so, we have...
Can you understand parents' frustration, especially when the last government said, we're going to give you a brand new school. You guys come in and say, we're going to give you an extension.
Well, the last government said a lot of things in the closing days, and they made a lot of appointments in the closing days as well. And keep in mind, they had 12 years. If they were really committed to do this, they had 12 years to do it. And they decided not to do it, probably for the same reasons that the school board is suggesting right now. So it's one thing, I think, for the people in that area to see a commitment from a government in their dying days when they ignored it for 12 years, and make that commitment in the dying days. So it's the school board that have brought this information, this evidence forward right now. But one thing for sure is we want to make sure we put the appropriate, and we will do our best, to make sure we put the appropriate levels of infrastructure in to support the educational needs in all our communities in our province. And we had to do so, and we know right now that there's more capacity that's required in the mobile in that area. And this is what we want to do, but the school board has taken a good hard look at this, and that's the decision that they've made.
Okay, so the very last question, I promise this will be the very last one. It comes from Jasmine Lester. Will you commit to doing another Facebook Live Q&A just like this one?
I've enjoyed this, Peter, and one thing for sure, that if it's Facebook Live, or if it's walking through a shopping mall, or if it's in a coffee shop, or if it's in a stadium somewhere, if it's through any of the communities that I will be around this province over the summer, I always look forward to engaging with Newfoundlanders and Labradorians. If it's so, I'm not opposed. I kind of enjoyed this with you tonight, and it was a great venue, I think. Always a great opportunity to speak to Newfoundlanders and Labradorians. I understand their concerns, but I think the people that I'm talking to realize that we are in this situation, and together we're going to get out of this. So the engagement with the residents of our province means a lot to me, and means a lot to our caucus.
Well, I want to thank you for taking the time. I really appreciate it. Certainly a wide-ranging discussion, to be able to take questions from one end of the province to the other and from all sorts of different topics. So thank you very much for your time, and thank you very much, everyone, for tuning in and submitting your questions. And since the Premier seems willing to do it, hopefully we'll be able to do another one sometime in the future as different topics come up. And certainly I'm sure this won't be the last time that I'm asking a few questions to the Premier. So
I guess not.
Whatever the forum is, we'll definitely have more questions for you in the future. So thanks so much for your time.
Absolutely. Appreciate it. I enjoyed it. Thank you.
Good night, everyone.